Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. This is Dr. James Lyons-Weiler coming to you live from the WWDNYK studios in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. We're ramping up the number of Unbreaking Science episodes because there's so much going on. And rather than go for 2 hours long, we're going to, do a number of episodes, focused discussions to bring you perspectives and views of the people that are at the front lines of the action. And without further ado, I'm really happy to introduce again and welcome back Dr. David Brownstein. Welcome, David.
Thanks for having me, Jack.
Man, you've been all over the place. I've seen you do interview after interview, and so we're lucky to have you here on Unbreaking Science. How is your study being received?
Well, it depends who's receiving it. The holistic world has been reading it and commenting back to me. The conventional world, I hear crickets. Getting to try and break through the conventional side of things is not easy to do.
Yeah, absolutely right.
Even though they have nothing to, well, they don't have nothing, but, there's very little to offer with conventional medicine with COVID patients who aren't hospitalized. And, I just can't understand the pushback and the negativity, I get for trying to promote people to have healthier immune systems.
Right. So, David, tell us about SEC. Have you heard back from them yet?
So it's a Federal Trade Communication, the FTC.
FTC, okay.
I got a warning letter from them a couple of weeks, maybe a month and a half ago, saying that my interviews of patients that we treated with COVID, where I was the interviewer, and I took a bit role with those interviews. I was just the secondary player. I wanted the patients to tell their stories.
Right.
And the patients did tell their stories, and I asked them, how did you feel beforehand? What'd your doctor do for you? What they do for you in the hospital if they were hospitalized? And, what'd you take, and tell me how you felt better, and, what do you think? And the FTC said that those were not interviews. They were not case histories. They were advertisements for my practice. So they sent a warning letter, a detailed 4-page, small font, bulleted warning letter, and gave me 48 hours to remove them or else. And so I removed all the COVID posts, which I was doing about every other day, because I was excited. We were seeing our patients with COVID get better. And I thought that, number one, it could give people hope out there, because there was no hope in March and April. There was nothing. COVID was ravaging the city. Well, where I was, it was ravaging the area, and it was coming across the country. And
Sure.
People who were hospitalized and ventilated were dying in droves. And I was trying to give people hope, and I was trying to give other doctors a different way to approach their patients so their patients could benefit from it. And I was trying to explain it in a simple enough way where patients could sort of do it on their own. And the FTC saw that as an advertisement and gave me 48 hours to remove it, which we did. And then we've still been in communication with the FTC. And, I was cataloging the patients as they were getting better, because it was patient after patient. And, when I posted the FTC notice and I removed all my studies, you sent me a private email and said, well, if they want a study, why don't we do a study? Because in the FTC notice, they said there's no preventive treatment or cure for COVID. Therefore, any mention thereof falls in violation of FTC law number, long number. And until there's a clinical human study which confirms what you say is true, you can't advertise that. So you sent me a private note saying, let's do a study. And I completed the study and submitted it to the journal, and, it was published.
Yeah, so I want to be perfectly clear. When I speak, is there a way you can turn your volume down? I'm getting feedback. But I want to be perfectly clear with the for the viewers to understand that when I contacted Dr. Brownstein, I specifically said, I see that something's happened. Someone's asking you for a study. What's going on? And I have a journal, and let's see what you can do with the study. You had not conducted or started a study until you had all the data from, I think, almost all of the patients, 107 patients. And so that qualifies it as a retrospective study.
Yeah, I was cataloging patients as we were going, diagnosing with COVID and keeping track of them and keeping track of their status. And then when I had that FTC notice, I knew that, look, they're asking for a study in their notice. Let's give them a study. And
Totally.
so, it's a retrospective study. It's a clinical case study. There was no one excluded from the study. Patients we diagnosed, we treated. I never anywhere in the study or in my writings or lecturing or interviews said we cured COVID. What I said was, for the last 25 years, we have been supporting people's immune systems during the flu season and seeing our patients not develop pneumonia, not get hospitalized, and not die in any significant numbers. Now, look, we've had our failures like everybody else out there, but our patient numbers compared to the percentages that should have been were way lower over the last 25 years. So we've been using this same therapy over the winter months when viral illnesses are their highest for treating patients, and with little tweaks as we learn new things. And when COVID was coming, I remember having a meeting with my staff who was on edge. And I said, I think we're going to have this covered. I said, this should be no different than the other influenza-like illnesses. We've treated other coronaviruses during this time period. I assumed, because we didn't culture everybody, I didn't really know, but I mean, coronavirus has been around for thousands of years. And our patients got better. And I said, our patients with COVID, I think, will get better. I mean, we'll see. I wasn't 100% certain that would happen. And let me tell you, when we started treating them and going out into the parking lot in snowstorms and hailstorms and wind and, cold weather, I was as scared as anybody else. I'm not a great patient to get COVID. I have asthma. I have scoliosis with lung involvement. I have no IgA. I'm the worst patient to get sick with COVID. And
I remember speaking with you, our first conversation about COVID. You said, "Hey, it's pretty bad up here. You're taking this seriously."
Oh, we took it seriously. I was scared, and we were all on edge. And as soon as we started implementing our therapy of oral vitamins A, C, D, and iodine, nebulized hydrogen peroxide, and then IVs of hydrogen peroxide, vitamin C, and intramuscular ozone shots, our patients got better. We had some very, very sick patients we were scared about. We were calling them every day. There was a couple we weren't sure whether they're going to live or die. They were so sick when they presented to us in the parking lot. And, they all got better. And I thought it was an appropriate thing to report on it. And, at that time, the news was terrible. I mean, New York hospitals were overflowing. Detroit hospitals were overflowing. And there was no hope out there then. There's not a lot of hope out there now, but, we were getting good therapy, and I was reporting what I was seeing. And, the FTC took it another way. So we're still in dialogue with the FTC. But I can't post this article that you just showed on my website. I can't talk about it on my website. I can talk about it elsewhere because it's in the public domain. But I'm, muzzled on talking about our therapy, because the FTC claims there's no human trial. Well, now there's a human trial because I wrote about it. But then in the last letter, which I got yesterday, they said they want a randomized controlled trial.
That's excellent, David. That's excellent. I didn't know that. That's fantastic.
Yeah. So that's where we stand with them.
That's really good, David. I let me know if I can help in any way. I can't guarantee that our journal is the right place for a randomized clinical trial. What you're doing is so important, but we are a safe journal. There is a wisdom to publishing in journals where it's not going to be retracted due to pressure from the moneyed interests. But we're not PubMed listed yet. We're going to try for that next year. But I think a randomized clinical trial is a fantastic next development.
It's a good idea, except that ethically, how can I randomize people to receive a placebo versus our treatment when we think our treatment's going to help these people?
I wouldn't do
very sick. We couldn't do that. I mentioned that in the paper. We couldn't do that.
I wouldn't do a placebo. I would do some other treatment versus your treatment randomized. That's what I would do.
Well, it's ethically not right for me when we feel we have the best treatment out there and for our patients. And, look, as a physician, if you're my patient, you want me to offer you the best therapy that I know of, and that's what I'm going to do.
It's a great teaching opportunity for the public right now, because we're public and we're live. You can do a multi-center randomized clinical trial that has different kinds of treatment options. So that's not your patients per se. In fact, it's probably a good idea to take this protocol and see if it can be replicated in another place. So I would encourage doing a study where you have other people that are saying, hey, I have a good treatment too. In fact, there's a doctor that I'm going to be interviewing next week who has hydroxychloroquine, and she's in Texas, I think. So perhaps you could do perhaps you could do a bake-off kind of study. It wouldn't be randomized unless she brought your protocol in-house or another doctor brought your protocol in-house and they could randomize. So that would be really cool. Yeah, that would be really cool.
You know, we're still digesting the latest FTC letter and thinking about how to respond to them. And, you know, the good news is the dialogue has been professional and been reasonable. And, you know, I mean, they're not agreeing with me. Maybe I'm not agreeing with them, but we're at least in dialogue with them.
I remember back in the early 1970s when my mom had breast cancer. And I was very young, but I remember her traveling to Buffalo, New York from Ogdensburg, New York, to participate in the study. She had very aggressive late stage. Now we every reason to suspect it was triple negative breast cancer. Okay. And she enrolled in a clinical trial on the hope that maybe she would get some treatment that would help. What you're doing is you're doing, you know, basically prevention of progression of a disease, right? And that's where we want to be. We don't want to be late stage patients getting hydroxychloroquine when we know it's not going to work. Right. We don't want to be trying to nebulize people in a parking lot when they should be in an ICU. So, I think if you don't mind, I'll try to make some connections with you, some of these other doctors with these fantastic protocols. And, you know, if they're equally good, that's still the results of a randomized clinical trial, isn't it?
The problem is that COVID in Detroit, we noticed the lethality of COVID just fall off a cliff around the third week of May.
Yeah.
And it's still occurring. You know, I saw a couple of patients outside, and we sat on the grass. You know, we're trying not to bring sick people into our office since this started in March, but they're not as sick as they were in March and April. And in May, around that second or third week of May, it was like a light switch went off in Detroit, and the lethality of that illness just fell off a cliff. And people were still getting sick, not to the extent because it had passed through Detroit, and I think, you know, enough people had gotten it. But the ones that were getting it weren't as sick. And when I talked to doctors around the country and even around the world, they're saying the same thing. The lethality of this thing just doesn't seem to be as strong as it was.
That's an external factor you can't control, right? So the external factor you can't control. You could maybe find a latitude matched hospital that's the same latitude, somebody that's doing the good job. Maybe they have higher rates of serious and critical illness and higher mortality than yours, and they adopt your protocol, and then, you know, who knows? You write in the protocol and you say mid-study, if the Brownstein protocol looks like it's X% better in an interim analysis than the local, then we're going to stop the trial and we're going to switch everybody because it's unethical to continue them on this hydroxychloroquine only or whatever it is. So science can absorb all of these considerations. I think it's really fascinating that they want to see that next phase. So that's a natural next development. So congratulations. That's a win. I'm going to mark that as they're asking for more science. That's great. That's great.
I would agree with that.
Cool. So listen, for the people that don't know the full background on this, you can read the whole study in the journal Science, Public Health Policy, and the Law. I am the editor-in-chief. I made sure that the reviewers that reviewed this had no idea, that Dr. Brownstein and his colleagues had no idea who the reviewers were. It was a blinded review. And we had 3 physicians looking at it, as well as one interested citizen, a very informed citizen. And the review process took a while. It wasn't like an overnight, sure, you're my buddy and I'm going to publish it for you. I wanted to be sure, because I want to protect the reputation of my fledgling journal. I want to be sure that it wasn't, some odd, strange thing and that you were doing. And I remember asking you to lay out in great detail the mechanisms that justify each treatment, and you've done that. And so I think it's a fantastic contribution. It's open access. Everybody can download it. Please, if you're in Michigan, please send it to people that have coronavirus. If you send it to other doctors in Michigan, send it to public health officials in Michigan. But if you, yeah, go ahead.
Well, look, the treatment pretty much costs under $200 for almost everybody who did it. We had a couple of patients who needed daily IVs for a few days because they were very sick, but it was a minority. There were two or three patients with that. Everybody else got one round of IVs and, did the rest of the therapies at home. The whole thing costs around $200 or less for most people. And when you consider that, the FDA's approved remdesivir for, I don't know, $3,000 and change per course, that basically lowers the hospitalization rate a few days. I'm not quite sure why where's Dr. Fauci talking about the immune system? Where's anyone talking about the immune system? All they're focused on is this vaccine coming forward. Well, what the public needs to know is the vaccine's not going to work if the immune system doesn't work. I sure hope they come up with a safe and effective vaccine for COVID-19, and let's hope it works. But it's not going to work if people don't have an immune system that can respond to the vaccine. And they pretty much need, and forget about waiting for the vaccine. I just did an interview with Newsmax about 20 minutes ago, and they had a promo to it. And Dr. Chauncey Crandall, who's a cardiologist in South Florida, was at one of the Florida hospitals saying that the patients are being held in outside the hospital in these bins, these big, I don't know what you call them. And he said it reminded him of Haiti after the earthquake when they had these big metal tubes set up for people to stay in, and they were just out of supplies. And he said, it's ridiculous, something like it's ridiculous for the United States to be in this position. So we can wait for the vaccine. It ain't here yet. And who knows if it's coming? Who knows if it's going to be safe? Who knows if it's going to be effective? But right now, people need a stronger immune system. This whole illness is a wake-up call for how sick we are as Americans. There's no excuse for this happening. And one of the limitations in the study that I wrote about was, well, our patients might be healthier because our patients have been counseled on diet and nutrition, and they were taking supplements, and they might have been healthier going into this illness. That may be the case, but good for them. And why isn't our country healthy? When we compare our country's health indicators to other Western countries, we're last in every single health indicator, from infant mortality to maternal mortality to lifespan. And it's a disgrace. And nobody talks about it. You don't see Dr. Fauci talking about it. You don't see Donald Trump talking about it. You don't see Nancy Pelosi talking about it. You don't see Joe Biden talking about it.
Well, nobody talks about it.
And they're so busy with, let's get this vaccine out there. Let's spend $1 billion to Pfizer today to pre-order the vaccine that they don't even know is going to work, don't even know it's going to be safe. And yet we just spent $1 billion to Pfizer for this thing. When there's, I don't know, how many companies are working on vaccines? 30, 50? I don't even know. And you can't wait till the cream rises to the top and you got to spend $1 billion right now. What's that about?
Right. So speaking of public health and vaccines, of course, the patients that do the worst with a COVID-19, SARS-CoV-2 infection have Th2 skewed immune systems. We know that. And we also know that aluminum hydroxide, which is, not only in food, aluminum is not only in food, but it's also abundantly in vaccines. That viruses don't tend to elicit just Th2. Bacterial infections, they tend to elicit a balanced Th1 and T helper 2. And so there's something askew. These people that did worse may have, I think, maybe coming off of getting a flu vaccine, or had the flu, got the vaccine too. There's something wrong with the people who were dying so quickly and so viciously, following up with the coronavirus. And your population, I think, is likely healthier. And so that means that, yours could be the best case scenario for your protocol. And scientifically speaking, in other areas where there's higher amounts of obesity, the people are less nutritionally balanced and so on, your protocol may actually struggle a little bit. And so it's an open question. Do you mind if I ask you a question that came from an Unbreaking Science listener from last time we were here? This question was, I was looking at Dr. Brownstein's study and wondering about this. There were a total of 107 patients diagnosed with COVID-19. 34 were tested for SARS-CoV-2, 32%, and 27 tested positive. How does this compare with other protocol study data? Do others have such a low percentage of patients testing positive? If this came from pharma, I would interpret this as padding results with 80 patients who didn't actually have the targeted disease, but I don't know. Maybe this is what all the COVID-19 protocol studies look like. So what do you have to say about, the status of your patients, at least from a molecular
So,
standpoint?
so recall we were in the first wave of COVID in the beginning of March and through the month of April. There were no COVID tests. We couldn't get them.
Mm-hmm.
You got a test if you were dying and in the hospital. Otherwise, you weren't getting a test. So we couldn't get the tests. And the CDC, Dr. Birx was in front of that microphone and said, we're relaxing the diagnosis of COVID now. You can diagnose COVID if the symptoms meet physician's criteria. It's up to the physician to diagnose it. And then the CDC put out a bulletin saying, you have to have 2 of these symptoms and 3 of these symptoms, different categories. Our patients met the CDC criteria at the time. We diagnosed them with COVID. We couldn't get the tests. We couldn't get the test in Michigan until the middle of April. It was 6 weeks old by then.
Right.
And so that's why the vast majority of our patients didn't get it. Now, there were a few patients who were referred to us by other doctors because I was doing those interviews before I had to shut everything down. And we had patients referred to us who were either hospitalized or very sick and not improving from other doctors. And those were some of our positive ones. And then we started testing as soon as we had the test kits available. But by then we were 2/3 of the way through our big crisis with it.
And there's some problems with the test too.
The tests are miserable. 30% false positive, up to nearly 30% false negative. I mean, what do you want with the test? You might as well just keep testing until you get the results you want, because they're miserable tests. And it's the same argument with the flu. I mean, most people aren't tested for the flu, yet the CDC puts out the numbers that 20,000 to 80,000 die a year from the flu, and most of those patients aren't even tested from the flu. So that would be my response to that.
Yeah, the ones that are tested, of the 55,000 that they say on average is the number of deaths that I've seen per year, only about 5,000 actually in previous years passed the test for influenza, and the other ones tested positive for something else. So molecular diagnostics in infectious disease, especially respiratory virus disease, is a mess. Bernadette Pager and I were talking about it yesterday. And I think that, with family permission, everyone who passes, their cadaver ought to be tested and characterized so we get real numbers. Patients might have 3 viruses for all we know. That's why people die. This kind of, the immune system becomes confused and overwhelmed. But in your case, you're in a very interesting position, because you have patients that came to you that under any other criteria, any other medical practice, they would have been diagnosed with COVID. There's no doubt about it, right? So there's no padding of your study. Also, this is a retrospective study, and you just included everybody that was given that diagnosis. So it's clear, and I would have called you out on that if I thought that was a problem. But going forward, there's a serious problem with doing studies on even vaccines, because they don't. Moderna's vaccine study, they didn't test the patients to see if they had active COVID vaccine virus infections. They didn't test them for antibodies either to see, or T cell immunity to see if they already had, and yet they're presenting immunological results in those studies. So we have no idea what that Moderna study. There were 15 patients per group, 3 different dosage groups, and that this is the nature of it when there's an emergency and you have to do science, now to get something. There's going to be limitations. So I think yours is, a really strong study given the situation. I really do.
Well, I mean, look, as I've said from the beginning of this crisis, the testing stinks, the treatment stinks, the hospitalization and the pattern of what they were doing to them wasn't good, even though doctors are trying their best. I mean, look, they were ventilating patients to try and to help them, not to kill them. It turns out that wasn't the best thing we should have been doing for them, and then the politics stinks. I mean, hydroxychloroquine, whether it works or doesn't work, I've never seen anything like this. None of us have. And, it's a mess. And what I just can't wrap my heads around, Jack, is Dr. Fauci, Birx, Redfield, any of them. Why aren't they talking about the immune system? Why aren't they talking about how sick Americans are? That what has happened to us? Why an illness that the vast majority of us are going to get and we're going to survive? What has happened that so many of us are not surviving it? And why don't we focus on that? Spend $1 billion on that instead of throwing $1 billion to Pfizer for a vaccine they haven't finished yet, and we don't know if it's going to work. We don't know if it's safe. We don't know if it's effective. But who am I? I'm only got 25 years experience treating patients on the front lines and reporting what I see, and then getting a warning letter telling me you better cease and desist or else.
Well, listen, you're a serious physician. You're an erudite scholar. You've written how many books?
15 books.
15 books. You're not just making stuff up as you go along. Experience-based knowledge counts in medicine, and that's why why doesn't the FTC contact people that are stopping doing the standard protocol of ventilation, saying, well, there's no randomized clinical trial that shows that you should stop ventilation? Why don't they contact those people and give them hell for that? So, listen, I think you're holding your bright light, and you're holding up to any. I'll put you up against any of the physicians in any of the major medical institutions that I've done research with, in terms of your objectivity, in terms of your forthrightness and transparency. You're as good as any that I've met.
Thank you. And it's just frustrating. It's frustrating. I feel a little muzzled these days, but hey, it's given me more time. I wrote the study, and I'm writing a book on holistic approach to viruses, so I've gotten more time to do that, and I've got more time to sail since it's warm in Michigan now, and we're no more hail and sleet and snow, and those are the good things. But what I don't feel good about is what's happening in Florida and Texas and California and Arizona. It's a disaster, and it's unfolding again. And yet nobody talks about building up people so they don't get this sick, so they can fight it back.
Is it really though? Because with the Florida data coming out that 100% of the tests come back positive.
It's true.
We don't know what the numbers are, right?
But look, the reporting, I'm not in Florida, but they're reporting the hospitals are full and the ICUs are full. So in Texas and Florida and California is getting full. So clearly something's happening. Yes, look, I hope there's more test positive, and I hope the hospitals aren't full, because the more test positive means we're going to get to that herd immunity like you were talking about yesterday with Bernadette. And we need T-cell immunity, we need B-cell immunity, we need all the immunity we can get, and we need people exposed to this thing. And I think we're going to get it. I agreed with what you said yesterday that, I think that if you would have talked to me about 6 weeks ago, I would have said, man, we're in for it in the fall. It's coming back. And, I don't know what's going to happen to our country. And, can we go into a lockdown again? I don't think we should, but can they put us in a lockdown again? But now I think with those new studies coming out showing there's more immunity than what we think. And, it always bothered me. Why was Michigan hit so hard, when New Jersey, New York and all that stuff? Why not Florida? Why not all these other big populated areas? Well, it's there now. And that's how viruses go. But the good news is hopefully we'll have enough herd immunity that we won't see this big hit in the winter when flu season comes back. The problem's going to be that people need to keep in mind, like you said, we get 50,000, give or take, people die a year from the flu. We're going to get flu-like illnesses again in the wintertime, but we can't have people panic and shut down again. And, we need better immune systems. Let's spend $1 billion that way.
Oh, I think that's a brilliant plan. So I want to be clear that I don't think that there are 50,000 deaths from the flu. I think there are 50,000 deaths reported by CDC as flu disease, of which that includes RSV, syncytial virus, influenza virus, and coronavirus. So now that coronavirus is here and it's going to take up its lion's share of the deaths, then we're going to see maybe 4,000, 5,000 deaths from flu. That's what I think. Unless they cook the data, and that's what they're doing. They're cooking the data. That's why Trump said, well, you've got to bring this data over to HHS. You have to start reporting to me in HHS, not to CDC, because I want real data in real time. Because
and you're right, the data. you're right. The data stinks, just like everything else I said before. And you're right. What I meant with flu, I meant influenza-like illnesses, and there's a bunch of them.
Yeah.
And you know, it's interesting. They're talking about this vaccine with coronavirus. How many years have they been working on a influenza A vaccine, and they haven't got it right? What makes them think they're going to get this one right? And what makes us think to spend $1 billion in advance without? I looked it up this morning. I think there was 80 people in that study for Pfizer. That's it. 80 freaking people. We spent $1 billion. That I can't even divide those numbers out to figure out what that is per person that this thing has cost us already.
Somebody's cashing in. So if you look at measles, right? Kids have measles type DNA in their body for 100 days after they have the vaccine. Right? In the Disneyland outbreak, there's a study that I just found. In the Disneyland outbreak, I think it was 38% of the people that were diagnosed with measles had measles, vaccine type measles, and the PCR test showed that it was vaccine type measles. Well, now they're going to get this vaccine out there, and there's going to be COVID DNA all over the place. Right? There's going to be COVID or RNA, I suppose, if it's the mRNA vaccine. But if they put, attenuated virus is going to be, viral particles and viral RNA all over the place. So that should not persist in the body the same way that measles DNA does. And yet we're being told that there are bits and pieces. The reason why the Israeli doctor that we just found out about 3 months after they recovered, apparently still tested positive for coronavirus. And I'm pulling my hair out saying, no, she just saw a patient with an active infection and she has the virus in her system. Just the presence of the virus does not equal an active infection. And even an active infection does not equal disease. And until the medical community and the population understands that you've got viruses in your body all the time, and they're not causing disease, and you'll test positive for any number of them. A test positive on a molecular diagnostic is not a diagnosis of the disease. You have to have, right? So we have to have symptom-based diagnosis, not molecular diagnosis. And the screens are completely unethical because you're going to be shutting down people's lives for 2 weeks simply because they happen to have the virus in their nasal passage. Come on.
And the gentleman who developed the PCR test made that same point, saying he never developed it for this purpose, and we've totally bastardized it, and we're paying the price for it. The data sucks, the testing sucks. I mean, it's just terrible. It's terrible. I can't believe we're in 2020 in the United States of America, and this is what we've got for healthcare. I'm astounded by it. I'm astounded that this is what's happened to us, and we're just letting it happen. We're like sheeple, a whole country of sheeple.
Here's my proposal, right? Richard Fry becomes director of the NIH. You become director of the NIAID, right? And
I'm not the best politician out there. I just speak what I think is the truth.
You point to the assistant director. You get to that's what I love. That's why you should have this job. You point to the assistant director to politic. You say, "Hi, everybody," and then you say, "If you've got any questions, talk to her." Right? Or him, or whatever. The point is, we need actual scientists, actual physicians. The fact that Fauci's been at the bench for so many years, right? And influenced by the huge money, and this is how we get 400 people working together on this consortium to actually get investors to invest in a not-for-profit called SERP, and it's going to fund the Moderna vaccine. How do you get investors in a not-for-profit? I'm totally flabbergasted about how they're running things. We need people who actually, know what it's like in the trenches, so to speak. People that actually see normal patients in a normal state, not at Bethesda, Maryland. Oh my God, the amount of adrenaline it must be going through all those poor people's, veins every day of their work life. In those kinds of systems, if you pop your head up, it gets chopped off. If you criticize your boss, you're fired, right? And we need that negative criticism back for process improvement. We can't have these golden boys that are untouchable like Fauci.
So my paper goes through a peer review process, and 3 physicians review the paper. I make changes each time because I read what they said. I thought it was reasonable. And actually, most of the changes were things I knew were the weak points of the paper, and I should have made them myself. But there were a couple things they caught that I didn't catch that were like, hey, that's the right thing to do. It was just constructive criticism. But you're right. it's where's the other side to Dr. Fauci? And where's the talk of helping people out so they're not so sick? My God, when I was on Newsmax, there was a promo for the Pfizer vaccine, and then they asked me about it, and I said, well, we can wait for the vaccine, but look what's happening in Florida right now. The ICUs are full, and what are they going to do with these people? Are they going to put them in containers? They showed a picture of the containers, and they're full with people. So we do need people in the trenches. When I go to lectures, I can discern in minutes, less than a minute, who's seeing patients and who's not seeing patients. It's really easy to tell from a practicing clinician in the trenches, who's seeing these. COVID's just another disease, but who's seeing COVID, who's not seeing COVID. You can tell in a second from listening to doctors.
Absolutely. So listen, I know we're going to get about 5,000 views over the next 24 hours of this, and so I want to speak to the listeners. If you understand what's happening here, Dr. Brownstein has made a call, not an overt call, but he made a reference to the people that are currently experiencing COVID-19. The numbers are off the charts in Florida, in Texas, in California. If you live in a state where you're being told the ICUs are full, the hospitals are full, the medical staff are overtaxed, please download this study. Take it upon yourself to find the email address of the director of the ICUs, the medical directors of the hospitals, and send this study to them. It's a peer-reviewed case series study. It's not a randomized clinical trial. Don't represent it as showing causality or anything like that. Don't overrepresent. But please take it upon yourself. That makes you the answer. You could save a life today by sending this protocol from somebody that's going to be put on a ventilator, somebody that's not going to be given hydroxychloroquine. David didn't use hydroxychloroquine, and he didn't use what was the other thing I sent you? Melatonin. But there's some pretty interesting studies about the mechanism of melatonin now. So, please send this specific study to medical directors of hospital centers, hospitals, and to directors of the ICU so that they know that their doctors have options. And I would really encourage.
At least for the people who are lay people out there, you'll have options. It's spelled out in there. It's not hard to do. You can do 80 to 90% of this, except for the IV stuff, on your own. I mean, it's that's what I was putting online before I had to take everything down. And it's interesting, when I got the letter from the FTC, people came up to me or emailed me and said, well, what did you expect? I was waiting for this. I'm like, well, I wasn't waiting for it. I was just reporting what I'm seeing and the truth of what I'm seeing. I thought that's what I was supposed to do as a physician. I just had a daughter graduate from medical school, virtual graduation. So the keynote speaker for the virtual graduation said to the class, keep in mind that you are as smart as anyone else out there. Don't be intimidated by others. Report your findings so others can learn from you. And when you report your findings and others learn from you, your experience will move on into them. And that's the greatest thing you can offer medicine. And so we're watching this. I'd already gotten my FTC letter, and, I was a little tearful because it was my daughter graduating. In the middle of my little tears coming down, and as soon as he said that comment, I said, well, except when it's COVID, you can't report what's happening. But, when you mentioned hydroxychloroquine, it's interesting, talk about the politics of COVID. So that family doctor in New York talks about treating 3,000 people with hydroxychloroquine for influenza-like illnesses over the years. Never seen it hurt anybody, helps everybody. In COVID, he said he's helped, I don't remember how many hundreds of patients with it, So when the negative studies started coming out with hydroxychloroquine, I looked at them. I saw they were using very high doses of hydroxychloroquine. They were already using it on ventilated patients and very, very sick hospitalized patients. Maybe it's too late then. I don't really know. But I thought, why is it getting all this negative press when this family doctor went up there and said, hey, this is his experience with it? It was sort of like me. And the guy's not going to lie. He's got no purpose to lie about what he's doing. He's just reporting his findings. And then the Henry Ford study came out a few weeks ago from my area saying a 50% reduction in mortality. So you've got this 50% reduction in mortality with hydroxychloroquine, and you got 3 other studies saying it doesn't help anything. The politics of this is awful too, and it's just
people are going to have to. The population you're using it on. If you take somebody that's on a ventilator and you give them hydroxychloroquine, what do you expect? Right? You can't expect.
You use too high of a dose too, so use lower dose. I've used Plaquenil, which is hydroxychloroquine, for years and years and years on people with autoimmune illnesses and other things, low doses, like what that family doctor in New York was talking about. I've never seen side effects with it. I've seen it successfully
Are you
used.
talking about Zavinko? You talking about Zavinko?
Yes, yeah. I thought it was a brilliant idea from him. And look, you brought up melatonin. There's melatonin, zinc. There's a few other things out there. We didn't use it in our protocol because our protocol worked. But I think that when you look at the biochemistry and physiology, and you support the immune system with things like zinc and melatonin, you're giving people a better chance than when they go into this thing deficient in zinc. And let me tell you, I've been checking people for zinc and magnesium and iodine and all these levels for 25 years. The vast majority of people are deficient in basic nutrients. Over 97% of people are deficient in iodine. In fact, the only ones that aren't deficient in iodine, I think, are the ones who've read some of my writings and are taking it. How do you expect the immune system to respond when it gets hit with anything, whether you want to be coronavirus or Coxsackie or whatever other viral bacterial illness you want to talk about? Again, this is a wake-up call. We can do better than this. And, let's come on, Dr. Fauci, if you're listening, talk about the immune system. We can wait for the vaccine. You already spent $1 billion. Let's spend some money and get people's immune systems working better.
Awesome. Well, I'm going to spend my time this weekend sending this study to everybody that I have in my email inbox that's got cdc.gov or nih.gov, and I'm going to try to get them to start talking about your study. One last question for you, David. You had 107 patients that you treated. How many of them came back to you weeks or months later saying, gosh darn it, you treated us, I got another infection, or I tested positive again, and I've got the same symptoms again?
So before our show started, I was watching your show yesterday with Bernadette Healy, and I texted you.
Not Bernadette Healy. I wish she was great. I wish I could interview Bernadette Healy. She was a god. She was great. Go ahead, Bernadette.
Sorry about that, Bernadette Pager. So I texted you guys both privately and said, because you asked a question to her, and you said I'm going to ask a question to him tomorrow on the show. We haven't heard anyone come back. We've had 2 patients who have some lingering, I'll call them mild symptoms because they're back to work and they're functional, but they have some lingering stuff that's bothering them and bothering me. But they're fully functional and doing things. No one's getting it back, and no one's going to get it back. This scare tactic of you're going to get a second infection of it. I don't have a crystal ball to predict that's not going to happen a year from now or 6 months from now, but I highly doubt that. This should be just like all the other influenza-like illnesses. When you get over it, you have immunity to it, and you move on with it. And you're not going to get it back. And I have no reason to expect that's going to happen. And we haven't had anyone come back. Our patients have fully recovered, and we're seeing them for other things or just routine healthcare at this point.
I think when you get to your randomized clinical trial, perhaps you should build in a 6, 9, 12, 18-month follow-up survey to ask how many of your patients who adopted this new protocol, they're going to be taking these vitamins and so on for the rest of their lives. It's a life-changing experience, I'm sure.
Let me tell you, my patients are in contact with me and my partners. We would be hearing about it if they're not feeling well. And so far we're hearing.
In my mind, David, in my mind, I meant that you had an off-site clinical trial done somewhere else.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So go ahead.
We were hearing from patients, and as we were treating COVID, the day before I got the first FTC letter, my partner and I survived COVID. Him and I were going to the parking lot and treating patients along with a couple of nurses. My partner and I survived it by playing tennis, and we would go after work, no matter the weather, unless it was rainy. We would be out there in some very cold weather, just smacking the tennis ball around to get the stress out. And so the day before I got my FTC letter, I said to Dr. Ng, this was an honor treating this with you. By then we were on the downside. We weren't seeing as many patients with it, and we were pretty confident we had as confident as you can be with anything in medicine. We were pretty confident that we had a pretty good therapy and we had a handle on this, and our patients were going to get better, whoever got sick in the future with it. And we're driving home from tennis, and I said to him, it was an honor treating this with you. And I want you to know, one of our deathbeds, whoever's going to die first, we should say that to the other one, at that deathbed. And he looked at me and said, this is the highlight of my medical career, by far. He goes, nothing even comes close to this. And I said the same thing to him. And the next day, I get the FTC letter and, telling me to stop talking about it. So I think there's a long way to go. There's a long way to go in our country. And look, it's going to take the people. It's going to take the population to rise up and say, enough. We're not putting up with this crap anymore, because until the people speak up, they just consider us sheeple, and they'll just herd us into, we're coming with a vaccine. We'll give Pfizer $1 billion. We don't even know if this thing's going to pan out. And we won't talk about the immune system. We won't talk about building you up. So if you do get sick, you don't get as sick, and you can recover quicker from it.
Yeah, that's your money. And if you've had a small business that went under, or if you have lost your job and you're hurting for money, your government is giving companies billions of dollars for vaccines that they don't even know that they're going to be able to use. That's what they're doing. They're pissing that money away on a bet that maybe they might be able to have some chance of beating natural herd immunity to the punch. So, Dr. Brownstein, it's an honor to have worked with you. I think it's one of the highlights of my academic career to have played the role that I've played in bringing the paper out, but I expect more. I expect a lot more coming out of Michigan in terms of highly reproducible, objective science on lots of questions. You're in a bully pulpit right now, man. You've got a good future ahead of you that you probably didn't expect. You could probably do about any publicly funded study that you wanted right now. So you let me know if there's anything that I can do to help, man.
Look,
seriously.
I'm a family doctor. I've wanted to be a doctor my whole life. I want to care for patients and help patients and make a difference. And, with COVID, this 25-year history of, I always say I've been practicing medicine for this. This is what I've been practicing for. And, it proved to me that people can be healthier, and that, I'm in contention with the FTC over this, because I'm going to send them another letter saying, hey, I never said we treated COVID. I never said we cured SARS coronavirus. I said we treated the immune system and allowed them to get over it. Because if you look at the statistics for coronavirus in the U.S. right now, we have 30,000 deaths, something like that. And we have how many millions infected? Right, there's 3 million now or something like that.
They report cumulative infections, so nobody really, active infections. It's probably very few.
They say that X number of people have recovered. If you've been diagnosed with COVID and it's been 30 days, they couldn't, considering you're still alive, they consider you recovered. How do you think they recovered? We already know what the cure for COVID is. It's the immune system. That's why all these millions of people have recovered from it, because their immune system went into a proper response, took care of the virus, neutralized it, and they got over it, just like they've been doing for the last eons of time in human history. That's what we need to be focusing our time on. And
I get that. But translational science is here as a tool for you, David. It's 100% waiting for you. If you do think deeply about getting, 3 or 4 different sites around the country that really do need your protocol, to try it on 1,000 people, that'd be fantastic. How many thousands of people would survive that otherwise would have died, right? So it's there.
Jack, I've gotten letters especially when I took my site down, which was really comforting for me. I got emails and notes and messages and letters through the U.S. mail from people all over the world. A bunch of my patients, and then a bunch of people I don't know who the hell they are. And I got letters from doctors saying they did this therapy. Either doctors did it on their patients, or the patients they read what I was blogging about, because I put the whole thing up there. And I put the whole thing up there very simply so you could make your own hydrogen peroxide nebulized solution. You could, how to take these doses of vitamin A, C, D, and iodine, and how to do it. And that they got better. And, that was very comforting. It's a great therapy. And keep in mind, this is not for COVID. This is for the immune system. So regardless of what the viral bacterial infection is, just build your immune system up. You'll have a much better chance to get over it.
Yeah. Well, listen, let's keep the conversation going. I'd love to talk with those people about having them publish some case reports that augment yours as little letters to the journal. If you have questions for Dr. Brownstein, you can send questions to Ask Dr. Jack at unbreakingscience.com. If that doesn't work, try Ask Dr. Jack at ipaknowledge.org. And you also have an email yourself. It's info@drbrownstein.com.
But I'm having trouble getting things out right now because we've closed down all my blogging. But if you look on my website, the FTC letter's there, and I am watching the messages that come in, and I am commenting on them. So, those who've sent me messages, I can't tell you how much I appreciate it. And, stressful time getting letters from federal agencies. I told my mother I'm happy to be the first in the family to get a federal agency after me. That, I'm really proud of that.
But you're winning. This is why I'm confused. You are actually not in contention with them anymore. You are in agreement with them. You believe that this would be a fantastic thing to see someone do a randomized clinical trial. And that's what they're saying, right? So I think you're winning, man.
Well, no, we've already won. Our patients are, go ask the patients. My partner's always saying, just ask our patients. They'll tell you how they did. But, it's interesting. They want a randomized controlled trial. How do you get a randomized controlled trial in March when this disease is coming around the country? And it's the first thing we've ever seen. No one's ever seen it. There's no randomized controlled trials of this. It's trial by fire. You're in the trenches with people. Either according to the letter from the FTC, how I took that is they kept writing that letter after every interview when they bullet pointed what I said or what the patient said. And then they'd say, because there's no treatment, prevention, or cure for coronavirus, therefore any mention thereof falls in violation of this federal code. What I should have said to the patients when they called and said they couldn't breathe was, there's no prevention, treatment, or cure for coronavirus. Therefore, I can't help you. Figure it out on your own, and hang up the phone on them, which we didn't do. And I wouldn't do that. That's not why I went into medicine. And,
you're not even allowed to then say, however, if you'd like to boost your immune system by chance.
Nope, can't say that because that's advertising for your practice. But look, it was an honor to treat those patients. It was an honor to have a staff that stuck with me through this, and it was a rough ride at the beginning when we weren't sure who was going to live and who was going to die, including us.
Yeah.
And
very rough.
But it proved what I've been studying for 25 years, that the human body is a wonderful thing. If we support it, if we give it the proper food and nutrients that it needs, it can really do pretty wonderful things.
Awesome. David, you're a rock star. I'm going to put the study up here. Let's talk again real soon. Hopefully we'll have some news for people about new studies on therapies coming in the weeks and months ahead. Dr. Brownstein, good luck to you, sir. I'll talk with you soon.
Thanks, Chad.
Thank you.